Hello, everybody. We're going to give folks just a few moments to filter in. We're glad to see you here. It's very exciting. Welcome to this very special evening. We're here to help Anna Quon launch her new book, Where the Silver River Ends. It's a thing of beauty. Thank you so much for being here with us. My name is Stephanie Domet, and I have had the great fortune to work with Anna on editing 2 of her novels, including this one. And so I'm just thrilled to be here tonight with this finished book in hand to help celebrate. I'm coming to you from my cozy home in Jabuktuk, Halifax. This is the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people, past, present, and future. I've been feeling grateful lately and in awe of the resilience and resistance of the Mi'kmaq people on this land. I'm grateful for the efforts individuals and communities are making to protect the land and the water, to reclaim language and ways of knowing, and to simply endure and even thrive. Wherever you are tonight, I hope you are also taking some time to learn about the traditional stewards of the land that you live on. So tonight, we are going to hear 3 readings, and then there will be time for Q&A at the end. So you can put your questions in the chat down below at any time through the evening, and we'll get to those with Anna after her reading. We have Corinna here providing ASL interpretation. We'll keep her spotlighted during the event so you can see her, and she may switch to her colleague Olivia at a certain point. But they'll be there for you. We also have automatic closed captioning, which won't be as good as what Corinna's doing, but is still a good tool. You can access that at the bottom of your screen under live transcript. You can just toggle that on and then you'll be able to see the closed captioning. Our readers tonight include Jen Schwartz. Jen was a sensitivity reader for Where the Silver River Ends. And of course, Anna Quon will read from her gorgeous new book. And to start things off, Anna invited me to read a little, and so I will, from my work in progress, which is a novel called Good Birds Don't Fly Away. And I am just going to read you the first 500 words or so of this book. And I will just give a content warning. My character has some sweary thoughts, so you will hear some tart language here. Robbie pushed her hands against the back of the park bench, feeling the stretch in her right hamstring. The morning had dawned cool, but as she ran down Parkside, through High Park to the lakeshore, the sky shrugged its heavy mantle of gray, and by the time she was running past the Palais Royal, the last ribbon of cloud streaked wispily across a bright blue sky, and sweat prickled on the back of her neck. The bench needed repainting. Green paint flaked off its slatted seat, and the soft wood had been turned into a message board by kids, Robbie supposed, with pen knives and thick black Sharpies. Fuck had been engraved hieroglyphically on the seat, the should-be curves of the U and the C sharp points instead, like the heavy metal lettering her brother Roman had used to write his name on his binders in grade 8. Graffiti tags bloomed across the back of the bench, familiar and inscrutable. They were ubiquitous on every surface along the city streets, from garbage cans to the plate glass windows of banks and shops to sidewalks and lampposts. As she moved through the city, Robbie tried to puzzle them out. What is, one of them seemed to say, or to ask, though it was unpunctuated, so she supposed it was making a statement. What is indeed, she thought. She lifted her gaze from the bench to the lake, which sparkled under sunlight, its vast surface oceanic in her mind. She switched legs, stretching the left out behind her, bringing the right closer to the bench, bending her knee slightly. It was like a bug in her brain, that tag, what is. If she were to take stock, what would she have? A decent life on paper, despite her half-gone family. Roman dead, her mother distant, her father still lost in his obsessions, and Freddie, well, Freddie was all right. Her stalled academic career, the deep feeling of ennui she couldn't shake, and a perfect relationship she couldn't stop chafing against. But on paper is not what is. She straightened up, tightened her ponytail, her coarse waves sneaking out of the elastic, leaned against the bench, watching the morning traffic begin to fill in along Lakeshore Boulevard. The downside of running to the lake was that home was very much uphill. She shouldn't have stopped to stretch. If she had kept going, she could have tricked herself into doing the whole loop, fueled by momentum. Once you stop, you'll never start again. She'd split the difference with herself. She pushed off the bench and ran the kilometer to the nearest bus stop. The house was quiet when she got home. "Moj?" she called. She listened for the little brrrt sound the old cat sometimes made, but heard nothing. In the kitchen, she felt her shoulders settle away from her ears when she saw a note from David on the counter. Come home together later? He taught an early class on Tuesdays, a graduate level course on trees in literature that he had developed from the ground up, he liked to joke, and sometimes went into the university earlier still. He liked to work among his books in his little sunlit cubbyhole of an office in the Jackman building. He'd been doing so more and more lately, giving Robbie space. She took everything he gave, often choosing to work from home as late as she could when he was gone, till some appointment or other drew her further into the city, to her own shared office in the much more pedestrian-looking anthropology building on the university's sprawling campus. She thought about the open tabs on her laptop, the answer she was waiting for, the question she was keeping a secret. She was fucking it up. She could tell by the way his eyebrows creased when he sat across the table from her as they ate supper and he talked about his day while her mind wandered. It's not that she wasn't interested, or maybe it was, she thought. If she was interested, she would pay attention. And if she couldn't even stir herself to be interested in his day, what did that say? It said more than Robbie was willing to. It said that things between them were dying, if not already dead. And yet, on paper, and yet, what is? She worried if she pulled on the string that was her discontent in the relationship, her whole life would unravel like a cheap sweater. They should talk about it, she knew, and David knew. Anything going on with you? He'd sometimes ask. Anything you want to talk about or tell me? And she would answer with the minutiae of her own day, the anxious students who haunted her office door, the thesis it felt less and less likely she'd ever get to write, the politics of her department. He'd just nod. Okay, he'd say. He could match her story for story if he chose to. She knew that wasn't what he meant, what he wanted. She just couldn't give him that. And yet she couldn't cut him loose. Because what if she was wrong? What if love is more like a tide than a fire? It comes in and goes out maybe, swells and recedes depending on the phase of the moon, the prevailing winds. What if it's constant but changeable, rather than something that flares bright for a period of time and then burns itself out? She didn't know. She couldn't tell. And she was fucking it up. Thank you for listening. Now, I am very pleased to welcome Jen Schwartz. Jen is a queer and disabled creative writer and collaborative editor who lives here in Halifax. While her main goal in life is to be a joy seeker sharer, she is particularly passionate about community, connection, words, and song, and how those things can change the world when combined. A former staff member at Elephant Journal and a colleague of mine at Mindful Magazine, you'll often find Jen correcting grammar and typos and things publicly displayed or pointing out song lyric references in everyday conversation. I know from my own experience that she is a pure delight, and I'm excited to welcome her here tonight. Please welcome Jen Schwartz.
Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you as well, Anna, for the opportunity to be here as part of this celebration of your incredible work. I'll be sharing two of my poems this evening, and the first one is called The Best Gift That Isn't Presents. I never really considered presents as a gift until adulthood. I would hear the word and think of Santa Claus, glittery twinkle lights, or brightly wrapped birthday boxes of mystery and potential. The necessity of presence has many ways to make itself known. It floats with ease to the forefront in quiet, gentle moments, joins us with a knowing smile in moments of gratitude, and barges in like an obnoxious partygoer when grief knocks on the door. Presence can be an expert at hide and seek when things aren't coming up roses, not because it's hiding, but because we're seeking. Anything to avoid stillness, the mirror, the reflection. The state of being present is a gift, the kind we should feel as great about giving regularly to ourselves as we do to others, guilt-free. The sort that ought to be mass-produced by giving a care and giving our care. The factories of our hearts do not need distribution centers, advertisements, or discounts. The gift of presence is an investment much greater than any bank statement could display. And this one is called A Timeless Invitation. You, something about the way you're made, the way your atoms stick together to form your being, or even more than that, your soul. It seems cliche, I know, but you stir me up, flip me right side up again, as if somehow reminding me not only of who I am, but who you are too. Who you've been, I suppose, as I sink into the sense that I must have known you before. Like a warm bath, it's rather comforting. You gently tug at my sleeves. Wait, is that my heart sewn on there? It's always been that way. Still, you gently encourage me to step beyond the neatly established chalk lines of safety, of known. For some reason, you make me want to do things I've never done, but always wished to. This dreamer heart so wishes to run, not away, but into you, crash. To live in a fairy tale, if only for a short time. For I know the reality of this timeline. I know I'm here to learn, to grow, and perhaps grow up and leave those desires behind. But first, gaze at the ceiling with me. Let words give way to nothingness in uncomfortable silence. Cut a square-shaped hole in the roof so we can look at the stars. Give me a reason to be spontaneous, releasing the once known flower child again, who so longs to hear your sticky sweet voice and fingers sliding down the strings of a guitar, because sometimes I think it must remind her of home, a home once known that can't be remembered. The recollection is fuzzy, but the knowing is deep. Pull me out into the grass, from the truck bed, sleepy, and drunk on no substance beyond connection alone. Talk to me about the hard stuff, and then tell me the very first joke you ever heard. Breathe in synchronicity, breathe out fear, for this is a timeless invitation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. What a pleasure to hear some of your work again. And now I am absolutely thrilled to introduce my friend and possibly yours, Anna Quon. Anna is a mad, mixed-race poet and novelist. She facilitates writing workshops, particularly for the mental health community. Her first novel, Migration Songs, was shortlisted for the Dartmouth Book Award, and her second, Low, is set in Nova Scotia's largest psychiatric hospital. I first heard her read from her work at a writing workshop that we both took at the Writers' Federation of Nova Scotia, probably approximately 100 years ago. Her sentences were intricate, beautiful, and true. They immediately grabbed my ear and my full attention, and it has been a huge honor to work with Anna as an editor and to welcome her here today. Anna Quon.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and thanks to everyone here tonight. I really feel that I couldn't have done it without a few of you, and I couldn't have readers without all of you, so I really appreciate it. I'm going to read a few sections from my book that, I think my title is backwards. That's okay. You know what it is. It's Where the Summer Never Ends. So I'm going to read a few passages from my book that describe or that help you meet my characters. So Joan, you might have met in Migration Songs already. So this is when Joan has just left Budapest for Bratislava. She's got off the train in Bratislava, and it's nighttime. Joan's suitcase wheels rasped behind her. She moved tentatively along the platform, unsure of her footing and of where she would go to spend the night. And she was hungry, her stomach like a sea anemone, opening and closing to grasp something that wasn't there. A young man leaned in the shadow of the station, tall and thin with hair as black and slick as oil. Joan stiffened and forced herself to slow down. He gestured to her with an open palm. The gold chain hung on his thin wrist. Roma, Joan thought. Speak English? He asked. Joan nodded. He had a toothy grin that nevertheless she thought looked calculated. You need hotel tonight? Joan hesitated, then nodded once. I know one, not dear, also clean. Come. He began to walk away. Joan stood rooted to the spot. He sighed an exaggerated sigh. Here is brochure, he said, pulling a rumpled pamphlet from his pocket. Clearly he had only one. He made sure he held it when she put out her hand to look at it. Hotel Serapluke, it said. There was a garish-colored photo of a tan stucco building with Baroque decoration, window boxes of red geraniums in front of which Slovak folk dancers danced, apparently joyfully in traditional costume. Joan waved him off. No, thank you, she said. The young man's face fell. Please, he said. My brothers and sisters have had nothing to eat today. Joan peered at him. His face was so perfectly sad that she almost smiled at his skillful act. Then he turned toward her, and she was startled to notice a little scar at the corner of his mouth, which gave the left corner of his lips a permanent downward turn. Where's the hotel? She asked. He brightened. Come, he said, waving her forward. His legs were long, and he walked quickly. It's not far. So that is Joan and Milan. And Milan helps Joan find a job in Bratislava on the first day she's there. So she goes to a language school and meets the director who doesn't want her to be a teacher so much as to be an assistant to his family, especially to his wife Misha. And Misha is a wheelchair user, and they have a son named Peter. Misha, Toye Jones. Misha jerked her head in a nod. Dobry den, she said, in a rasped voice whose modulation was somewhat erratic. She looked up at Burns, who spoke quietly, perhaps indicating that he thought Joan would make her a decent assistant. Misha looked up at him and nodded, smiling at Joan. Did she speak English? Joan felt the fluttering breath of panic around her heart until Misha chimed. I'm pleased to meet you. Do you like children? Joan stood stock still. She didn't know. The trauma flooded back to her of driving a school bus full of weeping 5-year-olds, her near hysterical outburst, and the endless cough drops she consumed to keep calm. The memory made her stomach weak. I don't know. I don't like children, Misha said. She reached shakily for her son, her wide grin mischievous. Only this one. Peter slipped from Burns' arms into her lap. Joan exhaled. So she was not paralyzed, Joan thought, at least not from the waist up, and she had a sense of humor. The little boy gazed at Joan from where he clung to his mother's neck like a monkey, rubbing his nose against her shoulder. There was not a hint of a smile on his small face. The Burns seemed to be waiting for something. Joan tried grinning broadly at the boy. Nothing. How did he come to be so expressionless this early in his young life? Clearly he was attached to his parents, and Joan couldn't think of what would allow her to climb into his affections. She turned away, turned back, and grinned at him again, but got no reaction. She drew her eyebrows together and puffed her cheeks out. The boy opened his eyes wide and grinned before burying his face in Misha's chest. Burns smiled kindly, and Misha's small teeth gleamed. She doesn't like children either, she sang delighted, stroking her boy's hair. So that was Misha, Burns, Peter. And you may have met Adriana in Low. She was the main character of Low, my second novel. And she has come to Bratislava as well, or is coming to Bratislava to meet Joan and to sort of explore her roots. Her mother was from Slovakia. So I'll read a very short passage in Adriana's voice. Below me, the shadow of the plain, encircled by a halo of many colors against the cloud. The talisman, a hopeful sign, as a rainbow always is. I don't want to let it go. Soon it will be night, and this bright shadow will disappear, replaced by the blinking lights on the plane's wings. I've been planning for this trip for several months, and I booked my ticket for the new year. But yesterday, everything happened so quickly, I can barely believe I'm already in the air, floating toward Vienna at jet speed. Jillian called me, and in that breathless way of hers explained how her daughter Joan was in Slovakia as we speak, and would love for me to join her. I rolled my eyes a little because Jillian exaggerates, but I felt relief. I'd have someone, even if it's someone I don't know. Joan is a hazy memory to me, stolid, socially awkward, and now a 35-year-old English teacher. Years ago at a dinner party, I remember her sitting with her parents, making her way through a plate heaped with soy sauce chicken wings and rice, while everyone else her age sat together, laughing and talking in the basement rec room. Even then, I understood that kind of isolation, because I engaged in it too. Separation as a means of self-protection. So I have one more passage, and this is when Joan, Adriana, and Milan go to the old market, sort of like a farmer's market in the middle of old Bratislava, and they've been drinking young wine or Burchak, and which is, it's a little bit like juice in taste, but it's pretty potent. So Adriana, her cheeks still pink, but her eyes slightly sleepy now, looked perturbed. I want to decorate cakes, she said in a small voice. Joan looked at her in surprise. Milan too seemed taken aback. I want to be a pastry chef, Adriana persisted. I love beautiful things and things you can eat. Milan hugged her shoulders and looked over Joan's head at the rectangles of light that were windows. He breathed. I want to be an engineer. I won't build roads and bridges. Adriana looked shocked. My father is an engineer. Yes, Milan said quietly. You told me another day. They both stopped talking for a moment as though lost in thought. Joan sipped her water and cleared her throat. And you, Joan? Milan asked. What about you? Joan had been wondering the same thing. I like to teach, she said, but I don't know. How was a person really to know when they hadn't tried anything else? And who was to say there was anything she wanted to be? Except she had tried. She'd been a failed bus driver, kitchen staff at a nursing home. Now she was a nanny and personal assistant to a woman who used a wheelchair. Joan realized with a kind of shame that she did not consider her the real job, but a stop along the way to something else. Milan pronounced loudly as though to the whole world, teach then until you know. Joan smiled back at him and lifted her glass of water. Nastavia, she said, clinking his glass and wondering if she would ever teach again. A man with a violin and another with an accordion sat at a nearby table. After half a pitcher of Burchak, they began to play music that was at once melancholic and buoyant. At least Joan could not decide what it was. It sounded both to her. Milan sat back in his chair and nodded his head in appreciation until Joseph came from behind the counter and gestured for Milan to join him. Milan jumped up and the two began to dance beside and around one another, their footwork slow and dramatic at first, until the music picked up speed. They became light and quick, clapping hands, slapping their chests and legs, and clicking their fingers in the air at shoulder height. Joan and Adriana watched in astonishment, and then it was over as quickly as it had begun. Milan dropped back into his chair, panting and happy and slightly embarrassed. Thank you. I'm happy and slightly embarrassed to be finished. Thanks so much.
Anna, thank you so much for those readings. It was so wonderful to encounter your characters again. I miss them. They're so alive and beautiful. Okay, so we are going to move into the Q&A portion of the evening. So if you have questions for Anna, you can put them in the chat. I see lots of love for Anna happening in the chat, which is really beautiful. And I'll just start us off. I have lots of questions for you, Anna. I can't believe I didn't ever ask you this when we were working on this book together, but at what point did you know that you wanted to continue to tell Joan's story and Adriana's story? When did you know that you wanted to pick those threads up and knit them together?
Well, it was before I started this book, but when that was exactly, definitely after I wrote my second book. I had no idea when I wrote my first and second book that I was going to make them into a trilogy. So it was probably 2015 that I made that decision. Yeah.
For you, you know, once you thought, oh, I could bring those characters together, you know, what was involved in for you in your imagination of like making the connections between them? You know, was it obvious to you that Jillian, Joan's mother, and David, Adriana's father, would get together and that would be the way?
Well, you know, I don't quite remember how that happened, but it is a very realistic scenario. They both grew up in Dartmouth. They were both half Chinese, half Caucasian, half white, and so they grew up in connection with the Chinese community. And when I was a kid, and Joan is like a little younger than me, like 1 or 2 years younger, there were barely any other mixed race kids. So it kind of made sense that, and there were not many Chinese as well, families. So it made sense that the two families would know each other. And they both were in the situation, Jillian and Jillian Joan's mom and David, Adriana's dad, where they were looking for another partner. So that's what happened.
It was natural to throw them together.
I guess so, yeah. Yeah.
What do you do to keep your imagination in shape? One thing I really admire about you as a writer, you know, when we were working together and I would say, I think you need a bit more here, or, you know, we need to see the happier parts of Milan's life, not just his suffering.
Right.
And, you know, you would say, well, geez, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then like 2 days later, you would come back with this beautiful scene, the scene that you just read, in fact, about them drinking the young wine. And yeah, so I'm just wondering, like, as a writer, how do you fill the well? How are you like maintaining your imagination? What do you do for that thing?
That's a beautiful question, Stephanie. I don't really know. It's a beautiful question with no answer. I feel like I have a lot of imagination, and I feel like that's my strength, really, is being able to visualize characters. So when you asked me that specifically about showing more joy in Milan's life in particular, and Joan too is sort of lacking in joy. It seemed like going to the market, which is a joy for me, which I don't do very often, especially during COVID times, would be a natural thing for them to do together. And yeah, so and there was lots of room at the market for them to sort of show other sides of themselves that maybe they wouldn't show in another environment. So yeah. Beautiful question.
Well, thank you. And thank you for that answer. If you have questions for Anna, you can pop those in the chat and I will relay them to her. Anna, in addition to writing beautiful prose, beautiful fiction, you also write poetry. And I wonder if you would talk a little about how those two ways of writing work for you, how they inform each other, you know, what's going to be a poem and what's going to be prose, a little about that.
Right. Another good question. I think so I think things like metaphor come a little bit naturally to me. Like it feels like that's reality for me. Is you know, it's just I don't have to work too hard to think that way. So in that way, poetry creeps into my novels as well, because it's just sort of a way of thinking for me. But I love my characters. I really love them a lot, and see them as people in their own right. So when I have characters, for example, in this third book, I wanted to return to Joan. I wasn't done with her. And Adriana, I also felt like I needed to give her something more because I left her just leaving the mental hospital and, you know, on sort of in a hopeful place, but also a very uncertain place. So I felt like I owed it to them in some way to come back to them. So when there's characters I want to explore, it's usually in novels, and but then the poetry always creeps in.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah. Your writing is so admirably poetic. I love what you said about feeling that love for your characters, and especially about Adriana and wanting something better for her. You know, feeling that you had kind of left her in a hopeful place, but she really doesn't have an easy time. And lo, I mean, that is not about having an easy time.
No, that's right. And you know, someone else asked me why what did they ask exactly? So why Adriana was in the first person in the book, in Where the Summer Ends, and why Joan is not. I really wanted to highlight Adriana's voice and give her a few little scenes where her thoughts were sort of there for everyone to see. And I was thinking about why I wouldn't write Adriana's story like a continuation of Low, set in, say, Dartmouth, where she was at the end of the mental hospital. And I think it's because, you know, she's very close, her experience is close to mine. And in my 20s, which is where she is in her early 20s, I had a decade yet of unwellness and unhappiness and misery, and I didn't want to write that story. So in order to give her something else, I wanted to bring her and Joan together in this book, partly for that reason, to get her out of her potential rut, I guess. Yeah.
What a beautiful
People.
of
Sorry.
generosity. That's such an act of generosity to your characters and to your readers, and then also Anna, to yourself. That's beautiful.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead. Yeah.
No, that's interesting you say that to me too. It is because it was a pleasure to come back to meet them, the characters, and kind of work with them and not just say, okay, I'm done with you. You know, it's like an ongoing relationship. And it's hard to sort of imagine that I won't revisit them again, but if I keep doing that, I'll have like 60 books. And I
It
don't
worked
know
for
how
L.M. Montgomery. It could work for you.
maybe. Yeah. I just want to say to people in the audience, don't make Stephanie work too hard. Ask a few questions because Stephanie has worked so hard already.
It is no work whatsoever to chat with you, Anna Quon, but there is a question for you. This is from Sunya, who says, Anna, not sure everyone knows your connections to Slovakia. It was some time ago that you were there. Did you draw from any particular experiences for this book?
Yes and no. I guess I lived in a small town called Nitra, and I taught English there for about 8 months altogether. And so I guess Joan's experience teaching English is drawn from that. As far as like, well, the relationship between Slovak people and Roma people is a complicated one in some ways. I mean, Roma people face a lot of oppression, I think there. I think is an accurate word to use. And their lives are not full of opportunity. And so that I saw that firsthand, and I saw sort of the two worlds that Slovak were living in and the Roma were living in. So I did draw on that for this book, this new book. Yeah. Thanks, Sylvia. That's my sister.
Always trust a sister to come through for you.
Yeah.
Our own Jen Schwartz wonders, similar to Sunya's question above, are your characters and scenes largely connected to people and places you've experienced, or are some generated from that strong and glorious imagination too?
The people and places. Well, they have some relationship to some of the people that I know, but sometimes it's more their physical appearance or but mostly they're from my imagination, I think. I was trying to give that a little thought earlier because I was thinking about my book Low, which was set in the Nova Scotia hospital. And I was thinking, did I depict any real psychiatrists or real patients? And I didn't. They were all from my imagination. The same goes for Where the Silver River Ends. But Milan looks like someone who I knew who was a Slovak young man, and yeah, that's about as far as it goes. Yeah.
Ren writes, I somehow missed reading Anna's previous novels, only read her poetry.
Oh.
Are the three novels interdependent, or can one read in any order?
Oh, that's a good question. You can read them in any order, I think. The first two stories are totally unrelated. Like I wrote them not thinking I would bring the characters together in this third novel. So I think in the third novel, there's a lot of backstory at the beginning. So you kind of get a sense of where Joan is coming from, and then you know a little bit about Adriana by the time she's flying to Budapest or to Vienna to Budapest. So the short answer is no, you don't have to read them in order. You can read them in any order you like.
But you should read them all.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yes, please. It's true, right? That's
Yeah,
Like what an artist makes, you should get it so that they can make you some more.
that's right. It helps, like I like my book to go, like if you buy a book or if you are given a book and then you pass it on to someone else, that's also great. Like I know not everyone can afford to buy a new book, and I really love when people pass it on and it gets in other people's hands. So however you get it, the library, even the dreaded A,
Mac.
whatever, online, but there's many ways to get these books. Yeah.
What's grabbing your imagination and your attention these days? What are you thinking about?
Well, should I say? I'm doing a few little poetry things. Right now I'm working on some acrostic poetry, which is poetry that responds to works of art. I'm also thinking about a film that I want to make, and I don't know whether I'll get the chance, but it'll be a short little documentary if I get the chance. And I would also like to make a film, a little animated film, because I make little animated films of my poetry of a poem of mine called Missing Beds. So those are things I'm playing with, but right now, self-promotion takes so much time and energy. It's crazy. That's really crazy. I use that word advisedly, but it's hard to have your brain on making something, especially writing. I find if you're also trying to go on Facebook and Instagram and promote yourself, it's a weird feeling and a weird space to be in.
They're very different jobs.
Yeah.
Right? The job of writing a book is like deep concentration, quiet, mostly by yourself or with one or two other, with your editor or whatever. And then the job of, that's a job of being a writer. And then the job of being an author is like being on Zoom, being on the radio, being on Facebook, being on Instagram, all the things that are not the like sliding beneath the surface of your next project.
Right. Yeah. So some people say they write every day, and I think, wow, that's amazing. But I Facebook every day. So anyway, but that's partly where I like to write things on Facebook that are short, that feel like they're going to disappear. So that's if I write every day, it's on Facebook. So.
Well, and there's some appreciation for your Facebooking in the chat.
Thank
From
you.
a noted local poet.
Yes, thank you. I'm not able to keep up with the chat. If I start looking at the chat, I will totally lose myself. So.
Yeah, do not look in the chat. I told you you didn't have to, and I stand by my words. Someone wonders, where can we buy Where the Silver River Ends? What do you want to say about that?
Well, you can buy it at local independent bookstores like Bookmark 2 on Smith Garden Road. I think you can get it at the King's Co-op bookstore, and you can definitely get it at Coles and Chapters. I think, well, Coles and Scotia Square, I know. You can also buy it directly from the publisher, Invisible Publishing, on their website. You can buy it online in many different ways, which I would tread a careful path to avoid, probably. But I mean, it's up to you.
And the truth of the matter is that any little bookstore, any bookstore at all, would be able to bring it in for you. And so if you go into a shop and you don't see it and you ask for it, there's always a chance they'll order an additional copy. And someone who doesn't know Anna will see it and think, dang, that is a handsome book. Let me get that.
Yeah, that would be so lovely if you would think of doing that, everyone out there. This is my dad.
Just passing by.
Yeah. And what I was going to say, there's some signed copies, or at least a few signed copies at Bookmark 2, because I dipped in there and signed a few. So if you want a signed copy, that's where to get one.
That's fun. That's a fun part of the process. Swanning into bookstores to sign copies of your new book.
Well, it was weird. I was standing there at the counter with my pen going like this and just thinking, it's like signing checks or something. It felt kind of weird, but then I thought, oh, someone's gonna get this and they'll like having a signed copy. So I felt happy about
Yeah,
that.
very exciting.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming. I don't know who else here, but I see 57 people are here all together. That's pretty exciting for me. I
It's a
see
pretty
Stephanie up in the corner, Stephanie Moore, and Heather Jones. I see you. Sorry.
so nice to be so celebrated. Zerlina wonders, how did you decide on the artwork on the cover?
Well, that wasn't my decision. It was partly my decision, but and I love the cover of my book. I have to say, I think it's beautifully done by Megan Files or Field Files. Yeah, and Megan is the designer for Invisible, and she showed me some different ideas at first and asked me to contribute like book covers that I liked, and she gave me something to look at and to think about movies that I liked and different, like there's a whole sort of range of ways that she got some input from me. But this was her design and she did a wonderful, wonderful job. It's sort of inspired by Slovak folk art, flower folk art. It's on ceramics in Slovakia. Yeah. So
It's a truly incredible package. They really did. And Megan really, I think, outdid herself. She does design beautiful books. I think this is the nicest one I've seen. It's so good. Your publicist says, fun fact, the design is the cover of the spring catalog of our US distributor. So that's exciting. That's nice. And Mary Ellen Sullivan says, congrats on being in the top CBC 66 books.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Yeah, that was pretty exciting. Yeah, I have all sorts of thoughts about why that might be, but I'll just take it.
I think it's probably because the book is really good.
Well, if it's good, people, it's Stephanie's fault.
Really
no, really. We did so much work on this book, Stephanie.
We had a good time together.
We did. Well, you had to pull me up off the floor a few times, but that was even that was okay because
it was entirely my pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah.
I was really happy to be able to just help it come through. Everything was already there. It just needed a little help to come through. Everybody needs that. Every writer needs an editor. Every single one. Yeah. I know it's good. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When you are asked to edit a book,
yeah,
like, do you ever say no? And what makes you say yes and what makes you say no?
So I do sometimes say no. I probably do. I like to do a couple books a year if I can, because I really love editing books, even though I'm probably officially too busy to do it because I have now an almost full-time job and I run the literary festival and I'm trying to write my own novel. But I do like to keep my hand in that work because I find it really satisfying. And I also always learn something from it about how, my own writing.
Right.
So, I said no to a book last year because I really felt like I was too busy. And even though it was probably going to be, are you okay? You're okay. Okay. Even though it was probably going to be a quickie, it didn't really speak to me. I would have been doing it just to do it. But when the opportunity came to work with you again, I knew that I love your writing and I really like you. I like hanging out with you and I like working with you. So that was just like an easy yes for me. And a lot of them are easy yeses for me. I just got to, if I know the person and I already am inclined fondly toward them, then I'll say yes, no matter what. And then if it's a first timer, I really like working on first novels with people.
Yeah.
I just like helping them find their way. It's very simple.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. I can't really say thank you enough to Stephanie for a lot of things, but especially for the editing of this book and my first book, because without her work, they wouldn't have, I don't think they would have got very far. So I really do appreciate Stephanie, and I recommend her as an editor in all cases.
Well, I would recommend you as a writer, any editor, because you're so hardworking and you blew me away all the time. I would say, I think it needs this. Like one day I said to you, okay, we need to talk about the first like 30 pages. There's too many of them. There's too much in there. You need to think about that. And you were like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then 24 hours later, you emailed me your progress and you said, I had to think about it for a couple days, but here's what I've got. And it wasn't a couple days, it wasn't even one day. And you had it right away. And I love watching your writer's mind work. You take something in and you just, I don't know, you just get it. And then you bring it back and it's like more beautiful than I could have imagined. So.
I'm good at taking direction sometimes.
And I'm good at giving it. So we're a good team.
Yeah. that works.
So we just have a few minutes left together. And I know it's been such a busy week for you with lots of like output, right? Interviews and attention and things. And I wonder what you're going to do after this. Like, what will your perfect day of restful self-care look like?
Well, it's going to rain tomorrow, so I'm not going to go for my usual 10-mile run. No, just kidding. I'll probably sleep in a little, and I might drink coffee, but I'm trying to fast from coffee at the moment, so I won't drink coffee. I'll save that for a little while later. But my day of rest, I don't know, Stephanie, there's always dishes to do.
There's always dishes to do.
Yeah. But
yeah, when I look up from writing a novel and I'm like, oh my God, this house, like what happened in here? It's hard to get.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you get a nice long rest, a perfect bag of chips just for you.
You know me. So
maybe a good book to read and whatever else makes you really happy. Huge congratulations on this novel.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And thank you for Jen as well for reading today and for her work as a sensitivity reader. And I'm sorry Petra Gilbert couldn't have been here today. She was my other sensitivity reader. And thank you to everyone who came and the interpreters. I really appreciate your work. So thanks.
Yes, I will echo those thanks. Thank you to our audience for being with us, for your good questions and your warm presence here tonight. As mentioned, you can snag your copy of Where the Silver River Ends at your local bookshop or at invisiblepublishing.com or at the library. I'll echo Anna's thanks to Jen Schwartz. Thank you for sharing your work with us. Thanks to Invisible Publishing for facilitating this super fun launch party. Huge thanks to Tori and everyone at Side Door Access for making the technical part of things so smooth. That's always such a pleasure. Thanks to our ASL interpreter, Corinna, and her student, Olivia. And thank you, Anna Quon, for writing this gorgeous book and bringing us all together to celebrate it with you.
I'm so glad it's over, but thank you for coming.
Oh my gosh, amazing. On that note, thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.
Bye.